Hello and welcome to Abe's commentary and review of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I tried to do this in a slightly different format given that I switched from doing Apple Podcasts to YouTube videos, but for some reason, due to copyright um, issues, I'm not able to include actual clips from the movie. I have yet to find a proper way around that. I am open to suggestions and feel free to uh, communicate with me through either the comments section here or otherwise uh, to give me some ideas as to how to do that for future projects. I am going to be including a few screen captures at least. Hopefully we'll be able to get away with that. But anyway, I do have a few things to say about this movie. And I will take it. Fortunately, I am also very familiar with it, having watched it so many times. And it starts with. Actually, before I get to that, I will also just say these are comments and thoughts according to me, according to Abe. I am happy for feedback and commentary about it in the comments as to whether or not you agree with me, don't agree with me, like what I've said, don't like what I've said, so that I can also improve on future projects I may do. Anyway, so the movie starts with Indy along with what appears to be a scout troop, uh, kind of on a bit of a horse ride in what I assume is going to be at least an overnight camp. That take note this is noted happening around the early to mid 1920s. I'd assume maybe 1930s, based on Indy's age for the later parts of the movie or most of the movie. Um, and they've gone into a wilderness, rocky, kind of area. Almost looks a bit like Arizona or Colorado, or at least how I kind of picture it anyway. Um, and they get to a place where there are some caves. The scoutmaster lets them go off on their own, something which I can understand to a point, given again his age. He looks to be late teens at this point. Um, and so there is a certain amount of trustworthiness there, but I'm also surprised by what happens within the next, say, 5 minutes of the movie with a few different things. So Indy and an overweight friend go looking through some of these caves, and as they're meandering through, uh, they hear the sounds of people doing something. They don't quite see what yet, but they decide to go and investigate who's in there, what are they doing. And they see from a heightened vantage point, or from an above them vantage point through what appears to be a bit of a hole in the cave where there's a rope dangling down. There's some people digging through, kind of doing some minor excavations. One of them is particularly vocal, but they find there what appears to be a gold cross, which Indy later explains is a cross belonging to, I'm guessing, some old ancient king or something, religious person or whatever, because he calls it the Cross of Coronado. Um, and Indy says a line which does fall through the bulk of the Indiana Jones series, being because he is an adventuring archaeologist, with Temple of Doom and uh, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He is, he does do his own form of archaeology, not really um, staying in one place, looking up, trying to find out about one particular thing, but trying to retrieve historic artifacts and get them to, from various sites and get them to museums. Temple of Doom, not my favorite movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't bad, and I will be doing a separate recording on that, but Last Crusade has been my favorite of the original three. I may do the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny. I may do ones on those, um, but I think that was a bit of a mistake. with those being done. But again, we'll see whether or not I get to in-depth commentaries on those as well. Anyway, Indy tells his friend, who initially has a snake hanging on him in his lap, which freaks out the friend a little bit, but Indy's fine. He just says, "It's just a snake, you silly fool," and tosses the snake away. Which again is a bit funny, given that later on, and you do see this in the other movies, um, particularly at the beginning of Raiders, that he has got a fear of snakes. So, and it does get partially explained in just a few minutes, but uh, yeah. Anyway, uh, Indy tells his friend to go get tell his scoutmaster, go get the sheriff, tell them both what's going on here, and Indy will think of something to do. Which turns out that after his friend goes, he goes down to where these people are, with their backs turned so they don't see him. He grabs a cross which has just been put down on a rock, climbs out, and as he's climbing out, he bumps a bean, which then alerts everyone else that the bad guys um, that he was there. They see him and begin the chase. So he runs down out of the cave into where he thought everyone else was, but everyone has uh, kind of gone off somewhere else, which is where I think this is where the Scoutmaster really went, huh? Really lost the plot, because regardless of age, if you're in charge of a group of people, particularly young or mid-teenagers, one would think, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, where's number 5? Where'd he gone? Anyone know anything about where Indy or has gone, or anything about him? But no, they're gone. Anyway, he does manage to. Now, I wish I could do that kind of a whistle. I really do. It's something I've tried doing, but all I get is. I can't. I've never been able to do that two-finger kind of whistle thing that so many people can do. But anyway, Andy does that whistle, gets his horse. His horse does that age-old trick that just as he's about to be jumped on, moves out of the way, so Indy lands on his ass, but he ends up climbing on the horse and running away. The other guys get in the car from a similar spot and chase after him. And they're going, and Indy manages to climb onto a circus train that is obviously going the wrong direction from what we know at the end of this particular sequence. But Indy ends up, and they all end up getting onto this circus train, going through several train cars. One enters reptiles, and he lands into a big box vat, whatever you want to call it, of snakes, which I can partially understand where, that causing, not to mention he sees a cobra, which which also would freak anyone out. But he manages to get out of there, runs along several train cars, almost gets captured a few times, but it's also in the lion car that he gets his whip, or gets a like for the whip. And we can see that that's where that comes in for later parts of, for his image. He ends up getting to the last car, which is a magic car, and I still don't know how the heck he did this, but he climbs into a magic box, which somehow gets him out of the train car. I mean, I don't see a hole in the bottom or anything anywhere, but again, it's meant to be magic, so hey, I'm just going with it. And here's where we see that the leader of the bad guys opens up the back door of this magic car, which is the last train car, and sees him running back down with, to safety, and we can see that, and that's the one I'm saying the train is obviously going the wrong direction. But Indy, given the fact that they were on horseback, at the beginning of this particular sequence, it would not have been close to the town. It would have been a bit of a way from originally, and the fact the train was going the wrong direction, I'm guessing it would have been late afternoon by the time he got home at the very least. And the fact that he was still running, shows that even as a young man, Indy had a lot of, was a very fit, very, energetic young man. But he manages to get home. See, that's one thing throughout this movie, and there are other times, other kind of travel sequences that happen in this movie, which I personally think are so very unrealistic. because, travel times from different places would take several hours, if not the better part of a day or longer, and yet the passage of time just doesn't seem overly accurate to me. But anyway, that's just a minor bone to pick. By the time he gets home, he runs into his father's study. We don't get to see his father's face at this point. We do get to hear him mumbling a little bit as he makes notes in his diary. And we also see that he definitely encourages education, because in order to calm Indy down from trying to ramble out whatever he's about to tell him in terms of what's just happened, says, I want you to count to 10 in Greek. So he values education and knowing, what would be at the time odd pieces of information. His friend comes in with the sheriff. His sheriff comes in with the bad guys who have claimed to be the good guys, and the sheriff has sided with them, and he has to hand over the cross, which he managed to retain. But he does get the bad guy's fedora, which he takes for his own. The hat, and that becomes the iconic Indiana Jones hat that he has throughout these movies. So far, just in this opening sequence, we've picked up several things which he then, which he then adds over time to his own image. The whip, the love for archaeology and adventuring kind of archaeology, kind of retrieving artifacts and whatnot to get things that, to put them into museums. The hat, and as well as his own kind of education, which his father would have, kind of definitely enforced or encouraged. It now jumps to what I'm assuming is about 10 years later, although there is no clear time frame given, but that's a fairly safe guess on my part. I'm happy for someone to, again, any comments or thoughts I make here where you can give me more accurate information, I'm happy for you to leave that information in the comments. But he's now on a boat in the middle of the ocean, which is also in the middle of the storm. He's being captured again. We don't get any kind of background for how this happened or why he went out with the cross in the first place. Actually, no. He went back was out there to get the cross, which he does get back. The guy who took it, or at least the financier behind it, takes the cross back off Indy. There's a bit of a fight that happens here. He managed to get the cross back, even though it nearly gets washed off the edge of the boat. But he does jump off. The boat explodes because we've got, stupidly enough, whoever these people were carrying a fair amount of munitions or explosives things on this boat, which really makes no sense to me, but anyway. And then he gets saved by one of those boat rings and kind of floaties that they have, just kind of happening on by in the middle of the storm. Again, unrealistic, and next thing we know, he's teaching a class back at his university. Once again, explanations on how things happen. I can understand them potentially being cut in order to keep the movie to a reasonable time frame, and of itself, it does go so close to 2 hours. And filling in gaps like this by having a ship was passing by, or he swam to a neighboring island or built himself a raft or whatever, essentially would detract from the main points of the movie that they're trying to do. But anyway, just before the class ends, he does make the comment that this is a search for fact, not truth. There is a difference, and X never marks a spot. Bit of an amusing thing, which we'll get to later in the movie. And he meets with his friend, who is also the curator of a museum, Marcus. He's an older friend, and he hands Marcus over the Cross of Coronado so he can put it in the Spanish museum, in the Spanish wing of his museum. After that, he goes to his office, finds it particularly crowded. He gets a package, or there's a small package, a little bigger than, I'd say, which is, he sees it from Venice, Italy. He doesn't bother opening it. And he doesn't want to deal with any of the students or anything, doesn't want to try going back through that mayhem, and so he sneaks out a window, so that he can starts to make his way home after what has obviously been a long day. Uh, and then he gets picked up. Now, this scene was slightly changed. There were going to be guns involved, but they didn't want it to be too obvious at this point who the bad guy was. That is something that I found out in a behind the scenes kind of thing about this movie. So they just, these guys pick him up and take him to Walter Donovan's place. His, what's the word? Penthouse, apartment, room, whatever, that's the word I was looking for. And they introduce themselves to to each other. And the first thing he shows them is a tablet that has been broken. And the first thing Walter Donovan shows him is a broken tablet which has been found in Ankara, which essentially states the Grail is real and gives some vague clues in terms of where it is. Indy and Walter then kind of talk for a little bit about various Grail legends, and how this tablet, along with a book which he has, which is written by a Franciscan friar, which is kind of like a monk or something, detailing one of the witnesses' accounts, that this did actually happen, that the Grail was real, and that this account is true. And then at the end of, and he also makes a comment in there, and I don't know, from all these clues, there is a different, certainly a difference in location from France and Italy. And it's a Franciscan friar. That's a French friar, a French monk. I still don't know how they got from France to Italy here. And again, that may be explained in the Grail Diary somewhat or something, but we never do get a clear explanation of that. But we do find out that Indiana Jones's father is the team leader, someone who's been very interested in Grail lore. It has been his hobby for as long as Indiana has known him, essentially. And that, Donovan says, we did try to, father for a while. He was the team leader down there, but he's actually gone missing. And his colleague, Dr. Schneider, said that, we don't know where he's gone. And so Donovan says, look, he's gone to Italy, but we don't know where he is now. Indy then goes to his father's home with Marcus, who sees that his house has been torn apart and thoroughly searched. Even the mail, has been opened, and that's when it clicks to Indy. Hold on, there's that package from Venice, Italy. So he opens it and he sees it's actually his father's Grail diary. Every discovery he made, every thing that he found out, and he's curious as to why it was sent to him. And he asks Marcus, do you believe that the Grail exists? And Marcus says, well, at my age, I'm prepared to take, a few things on faith, which I can certainly understand. And then, given all the evidence so far, he decides, okay, tell Donovan that we'll take that plane to Italy because I've confirmed Dad's not here. He's obviously in some kind of trouble. So I'm going to go after him. Now, the next time travel bit, I've had a look, and according to modern day time, air travel, it should take about 8 to 9 hours to travel from the US, depending on which side of the US you're traveling from, but roughly 8 to 9 hours from the US to Italy. And so they would have had to have left quite late in the evening to be able to have gotten there as early in the morning as they must have to be able to arrive in Italy when they did, and to be able to do everything they do in this one day, because this next day that happens is a very productive one. First of all, they arrive in Venice, Italy. They meet up with Dr. Elsa Schneider, who turns out to be quite the beautiful blonde bombshell. And as they're walking along, they also, from the pier where she meets them, to the library where they last saw uh, Indiana's father, and we also get a bit of a bit more of a personality description of Indy's dad being Attila, the the educator, um, and the fact that he was never giddy even as a schoolboy, even though Elsa does describe him as such, as he was going through various uh, evidences in the library to try and find where the knight's dead tomb or the dead knight's tomb was, to try and find the next piece of the puzzle. There's some minor flirtation that happens between Indy and Elsa at this point, but Marcus keeps him on point. And so they go into the library, and they're trying to find, as they're walking to there, Elsa also gives Indy a piece of paper with 3 Roman numerals, 3, 7, and 10. And they also point out that this library is a converted church. And after doing some searching for the Roman numerals and with some amusing bits going on, they find that the 10, the X is actually on the floor, and here's where one amusing bit comes in from earlier in the movie. X does actually mark the spot. There's also a bit of a funny thing with a stamp, and Indy trying to use a stanchion to bust through the floor here so they can find out what's below it. Elsa goes on down first, obviously to protect her modesty because she is wearing a skirt and doesn't want Indy potentially seeing up there yet. But again, that comes in later. Marcus stays up, and Indy does not tell Elsa that he's got the diary. He gives the Grail diary to Marcus for safekeeping, while he's down here with Elsa trying to investigate these catacombs. There's also a bit of an amusing thing as they're walking along to where there's an image of the Ark of the Covenant on the wall. Indy says, "What's this?" Elsa says, "What's this?" The Ark of the Covenant. Are you sure? Pretty there. And given the fact that he did find it in the last movie, yeah. Anyway, they move along, and here's one of my bigger. As far as Venice is concerned, I've got 2 big bones to pick, with the whole Venice bit. This is one of them. The other one comes towards the end of Venice, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So, in order to continue on in their journey, Indy has to bust through a wall, which is fair enough. It's an old wall, and I'm not surprised he was able to get through it. But he lands on some of the broken wall, which is in a fairly lengthy and deep thing of petroleum. I mean, when he ends up standing in it, it's about waist high, maybe a little higher, give or take, of petroleum. And he does make the comment, I should stick a well down here and retire. But few points. One, while he may not land in it from shoulder up, from say waist up much, he would get splashes of it on him, and he grabs a bone from one of the skeletons that's on the wall, because there are a few kind of dead guys that have been parked here over the years, or over the centuries or whatever. He gets the material from somewhere, maybe some of their rotted clothes or something, dips it in this petroleum, and uses a lighter to use it as a torch. And yet, it never, the petroleum from the dripping bits of petroleum from the torch, the petroleum that they're in, never catches the light. He never catches the light, given the fact that, that would have had splashes of petroleum that would have landed on him from when he landed there and elsewhere. And so there's that in and of itself, which I've got a problem with. I'll continue that line in a minute. They continue on through, find the dead brother, and so Elsa and he continue on through, find the dead brother, and find that the brother's shield contains the rest of the information that was broken off from the original Grail tablet in Donovan's office. And next, I'd call this big point part B, is that this robbing from his father One, Elsa never picks up that it would have had to come from the diary because there's no other way that Indy would have had it. Secondly, is that given what's about to happen, that rubbing should have been very easily destroyed on so many levels. Because you've got some guys who are following Indy. They knock Marcus out and drag him to another part of the library, and go down into these catacombs. We don't know who they are, at this point, but the first thing they do is set this petroleum on fire. And there's also rats here as well, which is also kind of a freaky thing, which I have just kind of glossed over, but again, that's just by the by. And you got this whole area of petroleum lighting up from where these guys set it on fire. And what Indy and Elsa do is they turn over the coffin that the brother was in. The brother and his shield and all that is now at the bottom of this petroleum lake, I guess I'll call it, for lack of a better word. And Indy says, get under it. Get under this coffin and you'll be fine. Which makes no sense because assuming this whole area is petroleum, regardless of whether there's a thin barrier like a coffin in the middle of it, it's going to catch on fire. There's no way that it's not. That bit makes no sense whatsoever. Not to mention the fact that after Indy leaves Elsa there so they can try and find a way out, you clearly see that his eyes are open under there, and you open your eyes in a vat of petroleum, you're going to lose your eyes. And not to mention that rubbing, even if it was in his pocket, his whole clothes are now completely drenched in petroleum, would not be water, not there, and it too would have been destroyed, would not have been able to remain intact. But somehow he manages to find a way out, tells Elsa, follow me, and they get out in the middle of, in a sewer, by getting out of a sewer lid that's in the middle of a cafe out the front of this library. Next thing, I mean, as I said, I've got so many bones to pick with Venice, it's not funny. Next thing is you've got these guys who have rushed out of the library. Now, this is pre-radio time. No one, at least, there would have been no walkie-talkie, no one on the top of that library keeping an eye out for anyone going anywhere. So they wouldn't have, and they would have had every assumption in the world that whoever was down there, be it Indy and Elsa, that they, let's safely assume they were aware of, would have been burnt to a crisp. When they set those catacombs on fire. But no, they come rushing out as if, where are they? Where are they? They got out. And yet, how can they possibly know this? But they run out of the library, they see them, and resume chase. And next thing we have is a bit of a boat chase. And they try to throw a little comedy in there. What, are you crazy? Don't go between them. Go between them? Are you crazy? But again, and then there's a bit of a fight that goes on, bit of shooting, and they all get knocked out except for one, which they managed to capture. They managed to get another, Elsa manages to hop into a different boat or something, can't quite remember how that bit happened specifically, but Indy drags the guy from one boat to the other, and then able to have a proper one-on-one conversation in terms of why you're trying to kill me, and as well, I'm just trying to protect the Grail. My name is Cousin. I'm a member of the Brother of the Cruciform Sword, whose entire mission is to, for 1,000 years, has been to protect the Grail. Which, that part, fine, no issues there. He says, we didn't kill your dad. You let me off with this jetty, I'll tell you where he is, which, they do. And he's being held at the castle of Brunwald on the Austrian-German border. So when you hear Austria and Germany, in this time period, which is early 1940s, it's safe to assume Nazis are going to be involved. And again, we do find that out more conclusively a little later in the movie. But after this, we now get to the apartment or apartment rooms, and you can the very first thing we see is the rubbing that Indy took, completely intact. No damage, no water splashes, no nothing. It's dry as all get out. Indy is in a bathrobe. Marcus is still recovering from his head wound, so it can't be, that too long after. Indy is dry, or at least you can tell that his hair's not dripping or anything. And we get our next piece of exposition where we find out that the Grail, that his father knew where to go, just didn't know the name of the city to start. He actually had a map in his diary where it said you had to, that there was a city near an oasis. That oasis led to a canyon, but I just don't know the name of the city. Once I know the name of the city, the other pieces of the puzzle will fall into place. And this missing part of the tablet that was on, that Indy got that rubbing of, indicates the name of the city, which is Alexandretta, which has become a modern day Iskandrin. Indy tells Marcus to go get Salah from Raiders, played by John Rhys Davies. Master actor in his own right, and has done very well with his career. I could go on for ages on him, but I want to continue with my movie analysis. And Marcus says, well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go after Dad. Little do we know, until another 15 minutes, how literal or how accurate that statement is going to be. In more ways than Indy probably wanted to realize. But anyway, he goes back to his room, ostensibly to get dressed, and sees that his room has been ransacked. So that must have happened either A, while he was in the shower, or whatever, getting himself cleaned up from this boat chase, petroleum ride, and everything else that happened that morning, as well as while he was talking to Marcus. And the fact that he didn't hear anything going on like that is odd to me. But after that, he goes into Elsa's room, and here's my next big bone to pick. In terms of what happens between him and Elsa from these points on. You can hear from Indy's room, which is granted right next door, the music that Elsa has going in her room. We find that it's going on in her bathroom. Indy goes into her room first generally, which you can see is also ransacked. And you see that there's a robe or something hanging off the back of the door. She's got an ensuite type bathroom. And he just knocks on the door, and goes on in. Elsa goes on in, and there's every expectation that she would be naked. Because again, it hasn't been too long, since the morning's adventures had concluded. And she could have been in the bath, she could have been, drying herself off or something, but he doesn't wait for a come in. He just knocks on the door and opens the door, says her name, and she gets a little bit freaked out. Fortunately, she is wearing her own robe, a pink satin or silk kind of robe, and comes out and kind of seems surprised that her room has been ransacked. And I got to agree that there's no way that the level of ransacking that happened, because you see paintings on the ground, papers everywhere, and various things that have been tossed and moved, ostensibly to try and find something, that she wouldn't have heard it while she was in the bath, even with that music going, because it was not that loud. Loud enough to go through a wall, but not loud enough to cover up that kind of noise. Particularly not through a very thin glass door. But Andy said, she makes a comment, what were they looking for? And then he pulls out the Grail diary out of his pocket, and says this. And she said, well, you didn't trust me. It's like, I didn't know you. At least I'll let you, kind of tag along. And then there's a little bit of an argument between them. And it gets to a point where, and first of all, my next minor bone to pick here is, I will say that I am married. I know what a woman's hair is like after it's gotten wet, and after it's been in the shower or been in a bath. It takes time to dry. It is not something that dries like that. And yet, assuming that she's just had a bath, or just had because you can still see the bubbles that are in the bath when Indy goes in there initially to alert her to what's going on. Whether or not that means, because I also safely assume that means she wouldn't have been able to be in there for very long anyway, because bubbles do, or at least a bubble bath usually doesn't last very long after you get in it. At least that's been my experience. At least the bubbles don't. But anyway, she's perfectly dry. The this robe is not sticking to her as though she's wet or even a little bit wet. It's as though it's on a dry body. Her hair is back to its usual kind of curly self and perfectly dry. So I don't know how she could have washed herself at all since then, or even dried off from this morning's events, but somehow it has. But anyway, they've gone back to Indy's room. She closes the door, and there is what I would call a flirtatious argument between them. And it gets to a point where he makes the comment, well, since I've met you, I've been through XYZ things, and ends up with him saying, well, my guess is Dad turned out more than he was looking for, and until I'm sure, I'm going to continue to do things the way I think they should be done. In which case, at which point he plans to honor. Now, she pulls back, how dare you kiss me? And if you look at this closely enough, and I have, you can see she's got a split second to make a decision. She can either go with it, and kiss him back, or go away from the situation and back off with the fact that, how dare you kiss me, and storms out of the room all angry and whatnot, and potentially damage the friendship, I guess, that's lightly built up between them. But in that split second, she decides to go with it, plans one on him, and after a little bit of back and forth, between them, they end up making love. With a gondolier sitting outside the window, which also puzzles me a little bit, because don't get me wrong, she's beautiful. I can certainly understand the desire that she would instill in a man to do those things, and the fact that she wasn't necessarily rejecting it would certainly be all the and the fact that she was that it was a consensual sexual act that they were both engaging in. I can certainly understand that happening from that standpoint, but the fact that he was planning on going after his father, who has been captured by who knows whom at this point, and who knows what's happening to him, because at this point, Indy has got no information on that. Hearing about Austria-Germany, it's logical for him to think Nazis, and the Nazis, could be, or were capable of some pretty despicable things, so who knows, and yet, he's letting himself get distracted by a beautiful woman, so he's showing, his humanity here. My next kind of thing, again, and here's another travel time bit. This one's actually believable, because it depends. We still don't know how things happen on a timeline kind of basis here. Do they finish up, with each other, get dressed, and go? Do they finish up with each other, sleep it off, and leave first thing in the morning? Because again, I would assume that trip, and this one, admittedly, I haven't looked up, but I safely assume the trip from Italy to the Austrian-German border would take a few hours in of itself. But they arrive at night, in the middle of a storm, and they change a few clothing items to be able to get in here, and Indy has given his hat and leather jacket to Elsa, and he's wearing Elsa's kind of artist, I guess, kind of making it look like he's an artist of some form. Comes in, pretends to be a Scottish lord. The butler isn't really hearing any of it. Gets knocked out by Indy when he makes a polite insult. If you are a Scottish lord, then I am Mickey Mouse. How dare he? Doof! And out he goes. They obviously switch back those clothing items, because in the very next scene, Indy and Elsa are walking through the castle. They see Nazis in a planning room of some kind, but continue to wander on through. Indy finds a room that his father is in, but does not go through the door because it's wired to explode, or to create an alarm, or something. Goes into the next room, leaves Elsa in that room does some, and here's another bit of unrealism on my part, uses whip to, because it's got to be a very long whip for this, to wind several times around a cable of some kind that's between two buildings, or maybe this is a U-shaped building kind of thing and two parts of the building or something, so it can swing out to where this other part of the room is. Still raining, by the way, lands on a small platform that is out there for no reason whatsoever that we can architecturally see, and then swings on through that into the window to the room where, to the neighboring window where his dad would be. And again, unrealistic, because that whip has got to be released, or in the second part of the trip where Indy crashes through the window, because he's got it back on his hip. However, he's got it connected. A few camera shots later, it's not still hanging out the window, tied onto that thing. It's also not slick. Indy was able to hang on to it without it falling off, and yeah. In the second he comes on through, Indy's father hits him over the head with a vase, which he finds out is a fake Ming vase. But we also see that Indy's father is played by none other than the now late, but definitely great, Sean Connery, former James Bond. And I also found out a little bit later that part of the reason why Sean Connery was used, even though Harrison Ford and Sean Connery are pretty similar in age. I think there's only like 5 or so years in between them, roughly, or something like that. They are pretty close in age, but because Sean has got the grey hair and stuff, he's able to pull it off. And they have a bit of witty repartee between them. Indy tells him what he's learned, found out it was actually Alexandretta, that it was the starting point for where you needed to go, and this excites Indy's father. They'll just call Indy Senior for now. And next thing we know, and here's next thing, these guards, who obviously have not done any kind of bomb disabling or alarm disabling, just bust into the room. And here's where Indy should have been alerted to, hold on, maybe Elsa's not quite on my side, because if guard comes in, or a few guards come in, point the guns at them, amusing point, Dr. Jones, and both of them say, yes. And the guard says, you've got the Grail diary in your pocket. Now, there's only 2 people who would have known that. One is Indy himself, and the other is Elsa. There's no way the guards would have had any knowledge of that. And as far as you didn't bring it back with you, did you? I sent it away to keep it away from these guys. But anyway, after a little bit of an argument, distracting type argument, Indy manages to take the gun, kills the guards, goes into the room where Elsa is, and sees Elsa being held hostage by a Nazi lieutenant. Or Nazi captain. I mean, I'm not familiar with Nazi ranks, but I'll go with Nazi captain, given the role that he ends up filling, for the bulk of the movie. And he's like, give me the diary or she dies. And Henry, or Indy's father, Henry Jones Sr., says he's not going to kill her. She's a Nazi. Indy doesn't believe it. But Henry's trying to tell him repeatedly, don't believe it, don't trust her. But as the captain makes a final threat, enough, she dies! He says, Indy puts the gun down, on a table, slides it along. Elsa gets released, takes the diary from him, and gives it to, the Nazi captain, to which he realizes, oh boy, what have I done? You can see that look written all over his face in the very next camera shot. And on Tula, there's got to be a part of it that's thinking, my gosh, she's a beautiful Nazi, but I slept with a Nazi? Really? But anyway, they go into another part of the castle. It appears to be a big dining room kind of thing with a fireplace and what looks to be a bit of a throne bit at the end. And I'm going to pause this bit here because this has gone on for about 45 minutes. And I just want to leave my commentaries to be about that long in a single part. Feel free to leave any thoughts or comments in the commentaries in terms of what I've discussed so far. And thank you for listening, and to be continued in part 2.